Thank you all so much for joining us as we continue to demand peace instead of endless war, death, and destruction. Thank you to many of my colleagues here who have the moral courage to speak out to save lives, no matter faith, no matter ethnicity. We know, many of us from just even in our district, that the majority of the American people are with us in demanding an immediate ceasefire. This isn't a fringe position, y'all. It's the will of the people. I know in Michigan, 53% of our residents in Michigan support a ceasefire. 74% of them are Michigan Democrats, and 64% of them are independents, all again supporting a ceasefire. People all around the world, from all different backgrounds, faiths, ethnicities, have seen what is happening in Gaza and have decided that they can no longer remain silent. Over the past few weeks, we've heard a lot about how the president and his administration are concerned and troubled by the Israeli government's actions. We're here to tell him, so are we. And yet, once again, we are continuing, though, to veto resolutions at the United Nations for a third time, calling for immediate lasting ceasefire. We're asking, please, let's go ahead and now prioritize Palestinian lives, and again, saving the lives that are there, many of them women and children. I want you all to know, in southern Gaza, Netanyahu has already promised to invade Rafah, even if there is a temporary ceasefire. I'm repeating this. In southern Gaza, Netanyahu has already promised to invade Rafah, even if there's a temporary ceasefire. Rafah, as many of us know, and many of us have talked to advocates and families, Rafah is where 1.5 million Palestinian families are displaced without food, clean water, and shelter. And calling for a temporary ceasefire is not enough. We all here are saying we need a permanent solution to this. So we know that there's nothing humanitarian about temporary ceasefire that feeds our children in Gaza before the bombing and killing resumes. So we need a lasting ceasefire. I know that 1.7 Palestinians, nearly 3/4 of Gaza's population, have been displaced. Famine and disease are rampant. I'm hearing about it every single day. Children are forced to eat grass, animal feed, just to survive. I saw a grandmother who, again, lost the parents of the child, was lost. Her grandchild is in the hands of her, and she's giving him, Jan, just water that's like brown. It looks contaminated. According to the United Nations, 576,000 people in Gaza, one step away from famine. In northern Gaza, 1 in 6 children is malnutritioned. I have a family, the Zachariah al-Rashi family in northern Gaza. The grandfather lives in my district, and he's saying, my grandson has a fever, Rashida. How do I get him medicine? How do I save his life? We don't know what to do. Using starvation as a weapon of war is undeniable a war crime. And is a war crime that we continue again to be complicit to those decisions. All across Gaza, the medical system has been deliberately destroyed. According to UNICEF, at least 90% of children under the age of 5 is affected by one or more infectious disease. Christopher Lockyer, Secretary General of Doctors Without Borders, told the United Nations Security Council, quote, there's repeated displacement, constant fear, and witnessing family members literally dismembered before their eyes. These psychological injuries have led children as young as 5 to tell us that they would prefer to die. Children in Gaza, we all believe, deserve to grow up. They deserve to grow old. Netanyahu, as we all know, has a long history of turning to extremism and violence to boost his failing domestic political support. And there's very real danger, y'all, that he will expand this war regionally in an effort to stay in power. I have families in my district that have families in South Lebanon, and they're already seeing a number of funerals pop up because of the continued bombardment. Make no mistake, the United Nations is slowly being drawn into Netanyahu's war. And we're saying enough. Enough. We all know that we continue to say we don't have money for removal of lead, to fund our schools, to try to address the declining healthcare system in our country. And yet we continue to invest in wars like this. We cannot stop organizing, as you all know, and marching until our country facilitates a lasting ceasefire. And that it also includes the release of all hostages and those arbitrarily detained. And let me just be very clear. We must say ceasefire now. We must say release the hostages. And all of that is not conflicting demands. They result in the same thing. They the alternative is continued death and destruction.
Right.
And I'm here to say, not anymore, not on our watch. I'm here to say that we must choose life over death. Ceasefire now. Thank you. Next, I'll have my amazing colleague that has led the effort in October of last year in leading the effort on the ceasefire resolution. She has been an incredible advocate, just a real true leader, but somebody that is leading with compassion. This woman calls me every single day to check up on me. And I'll tell her, you know, you make me stand still, and then I start crying. I feel so helpless as a member of Congress. But she makes me make sure that I don't feel alone. So with that, Cori Bush.
Call you because you're my sister, and I got to make sure you're good. If nobody else in this Congress needs to have a call to make sure that you're good, the one and only Palestinian American should receive the call to make sure that you're good. And so I love you, sis. Hello, everyone. I want to thank you all for being here. And again, thank you to my sister in service in this push for a ceasefire, in this strong push for a ceasefire, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib. Thank you for bringing us all together today to urgently and loudly and forcefully say that we, the United States, have a moral obligation to use our immense power to stop the Israeli government's plans to invade Rafah, where over 1 million Palestinians were told to seek refuge. I also want to thank all of my colleagues who came out today in support of this call, Representatives Lee and Garcia, Schakowsky. I know Omar will be here, Ramirez, Velasquez, Dingle, to Johnson and Carson. You all are such a great reflection of how strong our movement for a ceasefire is. I'm grateful for your advocacy, and it is this movement that gives me hope that we will see a lasting ceasefire in Gaza and a just and lasting peace in Palestine and Israel. The Israeli government's threat to imminently invade Rafah is unconscionable. Rafah is supposed to be a safe zone in Gaza and the last one left. It is where 1.5 million displaced Palestinians are trapped. And though it was referred to as this safe zone, we know that it is not really safe. There aren't enough places to sleep, and families are sleeping in chicken coops or sheltering wherever they can find a place. There is such widespread starvation that people have resorted to mixing, which we just heard from Rashida Tlaib, mixing animal feed with grass and feeding it to their children. Doctors and medical staff don't have enough supplies to treat patients for even some of the most basic illnesses, let alone the horrific injuries caused by the Israeli forces' relentless attacks on civilians, on civilian infrastructure, and even the humanitarian medical aid that is needed to help save lives. So to be clear, since Rafah isn't a safe zone, there is no safe zone in Gaza. And just think about it for a moment. Those of us that have never fed animal feed mixed with grass to our children. Let's think about that. There is nowhere else to go. Everywhere else has been destroyed, turned to rubble with bodies piled underneath. Nowhere is home, because if you leave now, while the U.S.-backed Israeli military is destroying and intent on occupying it, there is no guarantee that you will be able to be allowed back. And if this was your family, what would you do? Where would you go? We need to secure an immediate and lasting ceasefire. An immediate and lasting ceasefire is how we save 1.5 million Palestinians in Rafah. An immediate and lasting ceasefire is how we get the children and other civilians in Gaza the massive humanitarian assistance they desperately need. An immediate ceasefire and lasting ceasefire is how we ensure the safety and release of hostages and those arbitrarily detained. An immediate and lasting ceasefire is how we end the bloodshed, end the complicity, end the inhumanity. An immediate and lasting ceasefire is how we ensure peace and justice for all. And to be clear, only a lasting ceasefire can bring us these outcomes. Only a lasting ceasefire is acceptable, not a temporary pause, not a ceasefire with an end date, not pretending to care about civilians by sending them a sliver of humanitarian aid only to indiscriminately bomb them days later, only a lasting ceasefire. So this afternoon, Congresswoman Tlaib and I are sending a letter to President Biden underscoring the urgency of this growing catastrophe. We are requesting a meeting with President Biden. We are demanding an immediate, lasting ceasefire and that the Israeli government commit to ceasing any plans to bombard and invade Rafah. As lawmakers leading the push in Congress for a ceasefire, we want to hear directly from President Biden. The majority of voters in this country want a ceasefire, including 77% of Democrats. And the majority of the world wants a ceasefire. People in this country do not want to be complicit in the atrocities that are happening in Gaza. We don't want that. Not on our watch. And we've said it over and over again. Not on our watch and not on our dime. How many Palestinian deaths must our country be complicit in killing before the violence ends? How many Palestinian children must die before we stop bear hugging Netanyahu's extremist far-right government with our taxpayer-sponsored bombs and weapons? How many Palestinian families must be destroyed before we stop enabling these war crimes? How many more before Biden will act with the full leverage of the U.S. government to facilitate a lasting ceasefire to end the violence and save lives? If the Israeli military invades Rafah, tens of thousands more Palestinians, more than over the 30,000, will die. President Biden, we are urging you to use your power to lead us to a lasting ceasefire, to do everything in your power to put an end to the violence. The loss we have already seen is too much. Ceasefire now.
Ceasefire now.
Okay. Now we will call up Congressman Andre Carson from the great state of Indiana.
Thank you, Congresswoman Bush. Thank you to my colleagues, and thank you to my dear friend and sister, Rashida Tlaib, who has led the fight in this. I thank her, and I thank you all, because once again, we stand here for humanity. We stand here once again for those who can no longer stand for themselves. The 30,000 Palestinians who have been killed by the Israeli government. 30,000 daughters, sons, brothers, mothers, fathers, babies, children, and adolescents. Today, the population of Rafah has increased from 300,000 people to over 1.4 million people as desperate, grieving families have been forced to flee to where they were told they'd be safe. And yet, they are still at risk of relentless and senseless bombings. 600,000 children. I want to repeat that number. 600,000 children are in Rafah. An attack on Rafah is too costly. Today we stand here to say that even one innocent life is one too many. We cannot allow the Netanyahu government to continue the assault on Gaza. I know all of us want to keep children safe. And right now, Palestinian parents are comforting their children as bombs rain on Gaza and as warplanes fly overhead. Parents are trying to put children to sleep in a place that's not their home as famine and disease quickly spreads. These children have already seen and experienced unspeakable things that no child or adult should ever witness. They're not safe. Just yesterday, I joined my colleagues, Congresswoman Jayapal and Congressman Raskin, in leading a letter to appropriators and administrators to restore the funding to the United Nations Relief and Work Agency, or UNRWA, the agency that has provided necessary aid to Palestinians since the Nakba, that is already stretched thinly due to overwhelming need that is at risk of being shut down. We cannot allow the bombings to continue, and we cannot allow basic humanitarian aid to falter. Right now, pregnant women are not receiving proper medical care. Right now, women are having cesarean sections, C-sections, with no anesthesia. Children are experiencing highly curable diseases and injuries, but are dying because they simply don't have medicine. Families are starving. There is no way to put into words the suffering of Palestinians right now, but we have to continue the fight. We have to confront these disturbing images that we've all seen. So do not forget our shared humanity. Do not forget that Palestinian children are going to sleep with empty stomachs, untended wounds, and fear in their hearts. Don't forget the parents unable to sleep as they grieve and wait for the next attack. And don't forget the people of Palestine. And do not forget Rafah. Thank you. At this time, ceasefire now. At this time, I'd like to bring up my colleague, Congressman Greg Cesar from Texas.
Good morning. With 30,000 Palestinians dead and hundreds of thousands of more children and mothers and fathers injured and starving and homeless and desperate, this has got to stop. I represent the heart of Texas, and I can tell you that Texans want to see this stop. They want to see peace, and continued bombardment of Gaza and the invasion of Rafah are the exact opposite of peace. They are an escalation into more devastating war, and it has got to stop. We must use all of our leverage as the United States, as a Congress, asking our president to win a lasting ceasefire now. The news of potentially a temporary ceasefire that would release hostages and temporarily allow aid and to protect civilians is not the final solution. We need to get to a lasting ceasefire, and that temporary ceasefire must become lasting, and an invasion of Rafah must never happen. If we care about civilian life, if we care about democracy, and if we care about our own safety as American citizens, to stop this from becoming a regional war or a war that we ourselves could get dragged into, then we must win a ceasefire now. And with our growing coalition at this moment, if the vast majority of the American people can be heard, then we can achieve a future without occupation, without terrorism, without continued bombardment, without hundreds of thousands of more civilians killed and devastated, and win a lasting peace. So I thank my colleagues for their continued push and for our demand not only of a ceasefire now, not only to stop an invasion of Rafah, but for the long-standing peace and security of Israeli civilians, Palestinian civilians, of the Middle East, and of our own people. Thank you so much.
Ceasefire now. No more money to Israel.
Right now, we bring to you the legendary, the iconic fellow Midwesterner, Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky.
Thank you. I'm Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky. I represent a district in the Chicago area. So I am not Palestinian. I am Jewish. And I am so proud to join with my colleagues to say that we have to end this war, that there has to be a immediate and long-serving peacefire. And I am proud to say that and I am unhappy to say that Prime Minister Netanyahu is absolutely on the wrong page, and the very idea of going into Rafah means nothing more than more death. Now, I have to tell you, the attack on Israel by Hamas, that was wrong, but now we are seeing 30,000 people in Gaza who have already been killed, and there is no doubt at all, if there is an attack on Rafah, which has been pledged by Prime Minister Netanyahu, that these numbers will go up. And it's not just about the weapons that are aimed. It is about the people who are dying because they don't have the needs that they have just to live. The children who are dying of starvation, of disease that is unnecessary. You know, many wars that exist, people can flee. The only place that people supposedly can flee right now is to Rafah. 1 million people, sure death. And so you've heard all of the horror stories. We've all seen them on television. We've listened to the physicians that are trying to save lives there. We have seen that the humanitarian assistance that needs to be there is not coming in right now. This is intolerable. I am happy to stand with my colleagues and the majority of Americans right now who want to see an end to this war, who want to see a ceasefire, and I am proud to be here. Thank you.
Next, we'll have my sister in service from Minnesota. They confuse us all the time. I'm not joking. I'm always the member from Minnesota now. But with that, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar.
Really honored to stand shoulder to shoulder with my colleagues here today. I'm here with you all with a heavy of heart and a spirit as the horrific humanitarian crisis in Gaza rages on. Over 1.5 million terrified Palestinians in Gaza have crowded into Rafah in desperation, fleeing relentless bombardment that leaves them nowhere to turn, nowhere to hide, and nowhere to call home. Over 600,000 children now stand in the crosshairs of impending assault. My own constituent and her husband are in Rafah and have approval to leave Gaza, yet Israeli soldiers shoot at them while they carry a white flag. They are also harassed, checked, and insulted. Her husband was stripped down to his underwear, arrested, and dragged away to an unknown place. Arrested for no reason. There is no safe place in Gaza. Many in Rafah are yearning for the most basic, yet elusive need, a safe home for themselves. They have endured decades of occupation, watched their dreams of stability and dignity grow more distant with each lockdown, each helicopter barrage, each callous eviction. As an assault on Rafah extinguishes perhaps their last flicker of hope. The images that emerge chill us to our core. Entire city blocks reduced to rubble. People digging with bare hands through rapids for any sign of life. Wailing mothers clutching their dead children pulled from the wreckage. Entire families wiped out in an instant. A never-ending onslaught of violence targeting the most vulnerable. This unfolding tragedy is being meticulously documented. Each war crime and violations compiled by journalists, human rights groups, and UN agencies are bearing witness. And still, I ask, where is the accountability for these egregious crimes? Who else will have the courage to speak out against unconscionable brutality and stand firmly on the right side of history? Because despite the clarity surrounding Gaza's despair, the response from political leaders have been nothing short of callous inaction. Empty rhetoric about human rights ring hollow when no action follows. This administration's policies fail to meaningfully pressure Israel through aid restrictions, sanctions, or any hint of consequences. The administration continues to provide unconditional military aid, bypassing Congress to send $735 million more in bombs that rain down daily on a trapped civilian population with nowhere to go or flee. This administration cannot claim to be an honest broker of peace while greenlighting the massacre of Palestinians. The reckoning, the restocking of Israel's arsenal is not foreign policy. It is a state-sponsored violence waged against a defenseless families who want to only live in peace. If we truly want to uplift humanity, to protect the innocent people of Gaza, to bring hostages safely home, to hold out hope for peace, then we must demand ceasefire now. No more American dollars to fund Israel's bombs. No more children buried under concrete. History will remember those who stood on high moral ground. We must, at last, have a permanent ceasefire that guarantees security, peace, and justice for Palestinians and Israelis alike. And we must never remain silent in this moment. Thank you.
Ceasefire now. No more money to Israel.
Please help me welcome the incredible Congresswoman from Massachusetts 7th, Ayanna Pressley.
All right. Ayanna.
I'm always proud to stand alongside my colleagues behind me, but I'm depressed at the number of times that we've had to come to this podium over these 100 plus days. I feel betrayed. I feel haunted. I feel shame. Palestinian lives matter. We have stood together at this podium many times now over these past few months, and our conviction has not waned in the slightest. For months now, after the brutal attack on October 7th, the world has watched in horror as the crisis in Gaza has worsened daily. Our hearts cannot begin to account for the loss of over 30,000 Palestinians, 2/3 of whom are women and children. I know you all have heard this before, but we will keep saying it until it stops. Women and children who have been heinously killed by the Israeli military's relentless and indiscriminate bombing campaign. Over 11,000 children have been killed in Gaza, a horror that defies explanation. 260 children who never celebrated their first birthday. Thousands more weigh heavy on our conscience and in our hearts. Babies, toddlers, teenagers, young men and women. A child is killed every 15 minutes in Gaza. We cannot look away. Think of these babies who were sleeping in cribs, wearing diapers, or running for their lives when they were struck by a missile or shot by a sniper. What has happened to our humanity? Today, the people of Gaza are facing the unconscionable threat of an Israeli invasion of Rafah, the last designated safe zone. But it's important to remember how we got to this moment. First, the Israeli government displaced Palestinians from northern Gaza and said the south was safe. Then they invaded southern Gaza and said that Rafah was safe. Now the Israeli military is threatening to invade Rafah, where over 1.5 million Palestinian civilians are sheltering without food, clean water, or medicine. When will this cruelty end? For how much longer will the U.S. offer its full-throated support for the Israeli government as it violates international law and operates with callous disregard for human life? I've said it before and I'll say it again. Vengeance is not a foreign policy doctrine, and we cannot bomb our way to peace. History has shown us that time and time again. Diplomacy is the only path forward, and that must begin with an immediate, lasting, and indefinite ceasefire now. A ceasefire is the best way to save lives, to bring all hostages home, deliver the humanitarian assistance that Gaza so desperately needs, and we are not alone in this fight. Millions across the globe are marching peacefully for a ceasefire. Support in Congress has never been higher, and our labor siblings, the UAW, AFL-CIO, and AFT, are now firmly in our corner. Our pro-peace, pro-humanity movement, it is strong and intersectional and growing daily. Because from Massachusetts to Michigan and all the way to the Middle East, our destinies are tied, and our shared humanity is on the line. We need a ceasefire now because it is the right thing to do, the moral thing to do. But in case the White House needed any more convincing, I'll remind them not only is ceasefire good policy, it is good politics. The results in Michigan this week made it plain. Voters are not happy with the United States handling of the war in Gaza, and President Biden must change course. A ceasefire is the mandate. Thank you again to Representative Tlaib, Representative Bush, and our colleagues for bringing us together. Together we will continue to call for peace, to pray for peace, and to work for peace. And through the grief that we carry, we will never be silent in the face of injustice. Ceasefire now.
Ceasefire now. No more money to Israel.
And now I'll bring to the podium someone who walks with the strength of conviction always. Michigan Congresswoman Debbie Dingell.
You all have heard from all of these colleagues, so I'm just going to sum it up here a little. I talk to constituents every single day. People need to understand. People don't. They hear these words and they have no meaning. The population of Gaza is 2.2 million. More than 1.5 million have been told and moved and pushed into Rafah. They were told it was the only place for them to be safe. 85% of the homes in Gaza have been destroyed. There is one toilet for every 250 or 300 people. When you get to Rafah, there is not that. There are tents and holes in the ground. Older women are getting up and after prayers, going in the morning and trying desperately to not go again for 24 hours. There is one shower for more than 20 or 30,000 people. I have family in my district that has lost 40 members of their family, grandparents, aunts and uncles and cousins. Others that have lost 20 members. We know there is no food. There's no water. I have a doctor at the University of Michigan who would call me at night crying because he was trying to get his father and his stepmother and his siblings out. And they were down to just a little salt water, which they shouldn't have been drinking, and the salt water was almost gone. And he was sure that they were going to die. They had all the paperwork. They just can't get on the list to cross the bridges. He finally did, and I won't tell you what I think of. I mean, people don't realize that we've got families that desperately want to leave. They have a place to go, and they cannot get on the list to get out, to get to the other side. There are people with guns shooting at people trying to bring in humanitarian aid. People are starving to death. There is a danger of famine. You know, I keep saying to people, every child, I don't care if you're a Jewish child, a Palestinian child, or any child, deserves to be born into peace, deserves to have a secure future with food and health care. And when 12,000 children have died, we need to ask ourselves questions. And how many more may die? How many more don't have parents? How many don't have limbs and were operated on without anesthesia? Any attack on Rafah right now will kill thousands more. We need a ceasefire. We need no one else to die.
Ceasefire now. Ceasefire now. No more money to Israel.
So I'm going to open up for questions. Yeah.
We witnessed 2 days ago how the eyeballs of the rest of the world were looking at Michigan to see how they can change course when it comes to the ceasefire. What's coming next? Are you going to coordinate with your sister Ilhan Omar in order to do the same thing in Minnesota? And also, is it going to take place also on the congressional level, where if you do not vote or support ceasefire, you're going to face that level of uncommitted votes?
I mean, I think right now, you know, just so you all know, I love Michigan. We birthed movements, as you can see, is not only making water a human right, but now even with the movement of saying, look, don't stay home. Use our democracy to say something to the president. Use it as a way to voice your opinion, and show them like where you are right now in regards to support. But you know, we're not going to go into the backyards of other states and tell them what to do. I think what is so beautiful about our country is every community is different. Every community is going to decide, you know, how, again, to use our democracy. You know, I always tell people, look, you show up for marches, you show up to protests, you call your members of Congress, you call local, you passing city, local resolutions. You can also use the ballot box to speak that truth. And it's really important for folks to understand. I am incredibly scared of a second term of Trump. And I think it's really important to emphasize this. Right now, our democracy is at stake. And I'm asking the president, and I think many of us are saying, you know, change course, because you're threatening literally our democracy. Please, you know, understand, listen to us. Listen not only to Michigan, but so many people. The majority of Americans are supporting a ceasefire. This is not something that, again, should just be, you know, oh, don't worry about it, we're going to keep going. I think it's very, very clear. I mean, this is better than any poll, any way to think, well, what are folks thinking about right now? And again, when I talk to folks that voted this way in our community, they said, Rashida, I would have stayed home. But now I felt like I had an option, a way to speak my truth and my core values. And I think it's incredibly powerful. And I'm you know, going to see again, what makes our country great is that we get to use that ballot box to say something to the people that are in power, including those that are supposed to represent us. Yeah.
Congressman Nick with Politico, what is your message to voters who voted uncommitted on Tuesday who are thinking about staying home in November?
Now, I always tell folks when they think about that is don't stay home. I mean, one thing that I know about staying home is you're making us more invisible. I want you to exercise your right to vote, and I really mean this. But also think of the whole ballot. You know, everybody's always driven by what's on top of the ballot and what's, you know that there's so many other folks on that ballot, many of which support a ceasefire, many city council members courageously proposing ceasefire resolutions, folks that have been working on rent is too damn high in Michigan, making water a human right in Michigan, and all of those things. To think of that ballot as a way to speak that truth of what you believe in and not always think about that top of that ticket. I find that when folks do that, again, it makes us more invisible. Why not use and create a voting block in speaking what your truth is and speaking about what you believe in? And I'm really looking forward to seeing folks again, especially in my Michigan 12th congressional district, to continue to increase the way folks use that ballot, that right to vote, to speak that truth. So,
will you vote for President Biden in November?
Thank you very much, y'all. Thank you.
Thank you. We love you. Thank you. Thank you.